everyone, and welcome. This is episode 355 of Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network. I'm James, joined by the whole gang this week. Ryan is here, and Paul is back from his Bourbon Cast trip of the year. Paul, how was your travels?
They were good. I have learned a lot of lessons about doing the circuits, the convention circuit. One of which is to go home at a reasonable hour and actually hit the gym once instead of drinking to all hours. The bourbon cast is much less painful the following day than it was last year for this reason. Perhaps less entertaining, but I do not care. And so went really well. Actually took a lot away from it in terms of professional growth and my understanding of how AI works quite a bit better than it was when I went in, which is what I look for at these things. But this is quite the week. So I was traveling during the week. Jody is bookending me. She was gone last weekend, and she is gone this weekend. So I'm solo parenting. And yesterday, by the way, thanks, Mom. A shout out to my mother. I hosted a 16-person boy 11th birthday party Nerf battle in my backyard. And only a few minor injuries were suffered. So good job to all the kids.
And your mom came down and helped with that?
She's going to sleep for a week, and I would if I didn't have to go to work.
Nice.
Awesome. Ryan, how you been?
Good. Liverpool drew when they were not the better team this morning against Arsenal, so I will take that every time when you come out of a tough match with a draw, even though you were not the better team. I will take that.
Really quick, sorry to interrupt Ryan's. How are you doing? I watched soccer this morning because my mom had to get off early and help her pack, and my kids were up, and so I watched the Newcastle versus Chelsea game that was on. And I only want to break in because I just want to mention that I have never seen a team with less pitch/court awareness than Newcastle, and for a team I don't care about at all. I spent like a straight half hour screaming about open passing lanes and getting the ball outside and pulling the trigger once they'd created space for a shot. And they just never did any of that. I can't believe that they are at the top level of the Premier League. They look like absolute garbage based on my 30-minute sample size. And they still almost drew with Chelsea somehow, miraculously. But that is a garbage team, and I feel bad for all the fans of Newcastle out there.
Oh, they're very morally compromised. They're the ones that are owned by the Saudi PIF fund now.
Oh, okay. Then I'm glad they're garbage. Great.
Yeah, that's the Crown Prince is really the one running the show there, and that's yeah. It's been a whole thing, but yeah. Anyway, the Badgers. The less said about that, the better. But they hung in, and that was
it was fine for a half, which is the story of the 2024 Badgers. So
yeah. Well, Braden Locke is probably not what we need, but he's been competent enough to get them wins against, mediocre to decent competition. So, okay, whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
Classic 25 arm, though. Not going to do it.
Yeah.
No, he tries to wing it, and then you end up throwing a 15-yard pick six. So that's bad. Don't do that. And now they've got Kinnick at night, which is a nightmare scenario. So I don't know. Just get that sixth win against Minnesota and call it a year. I don't know. All right. Like we mentioned, last week too, and still the case, not a whole lot of Brewers news going on right now. We are recording this in the, break between game 2 and game 3 of the World Series. So we'll talk some World Series stuff. But then there is some Brewers news that dropped about the hitting coach situation. And we know that we love talking about hitting coaches here. So we'll do that real quick. But first of all, a reminder off the top, patreon.com/MKE tailgate. $2 a month gets you question priority, both on this podcast and on reporting as eligible. The $5 level gets you that perk, plus the additional exclusive podcast, the Minor League Extra, as well as Paul's mini pods. And Paul, I don't know. I feel like there might be some questions about the injury proneness of Jordan Love, or just freak injuries and still coming away with a really stupid game on Sunday.
Yeah, I don't know that he's injury prone necessarily. I just think he's injured and has been.
Yeah.
Since the first injury, this is just injury on injury.
Compensating, right? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. But at least we have a very, I can't say enough about Malik Willis. I'm not sure he has true starter's chops, but I think he's shown the wisdom of having a highly coachable backup who does have at least a couple of elite traits to work with. Even if he's not going to be getting it through his reads like lightning, you can do a lot with him. And he saved the game today. But yeah, I think there'll be a lot of questions because Jordan he looks really gimpy. I'm not even sure that interception was as bad as it looked on first throw, given that he was not getting velocity on any throws. But
right.
There's a lot to talk about on the Packers because they're definitely in flux. Also, I should mention, we are likely recording on Monday this week and maybe for a while because Paul has a Tuesday thing. So we'll see. But for Monday for this week for sure. So chop on your questions.
All right. Keep that in mind and look out for the call for questions on Patreon as well. All right, as mentioned, the World Series started since the last time we spoke here, and it started with a bang on Friday night. I got home just in time from a Halloween party to kind of see the highlights hit Twitter. Hobbled Freddie Freeman hitting the walk-off grand slam, apparently the first walk-off grand slam in World Series history, which is impressive in itself, but also doing it in the shades of Kirk Gibson, right? You had Joe Davis making that call, referencing Kirk Gibson, and it went to almost the exact same spot. Relatively, similar stories there. And Gibson was hobbled in 1988. Dodgers then went on and held on to game 2. Potentially lost Shohei Ohtani. He had to leave that game, but the news coming out Sunday, he is going to try to play at least game 3 as the series shifts to New York. So that's good to see. As we've talked about before, I don't know how many Brewers fans specifically enjoy seeing the two payroll behemoths, the Dodgers and the Yankees, face off, but also on the other side of the coin, I'm kind of just enjoying the games because these are the game's best players going head to head, and the games have been really good. So I guess let's start there. Paul, have you been able to catch any of the World Series? I know you've been traveling, but are you interested in this at all?
Not really. So I have been traveling and I have not been able to even go out of my way to watch baseball while I've been doing it, or been watching my kids solo. Either way, baseball has not been on. And I like seeing Ohtani play in particular. I did just happen to tune in for the Grand Slam as well, which was cool. I'm glad I caught that. But the Dodgers and Yankees, I think I care even less about than normal because they are, two storied franchises. The Dodgers are not the NL leader, the Cardinals are, but they've won enough. If they win another championship, it's just a check mark as far as I'm concerned. I don't care. I would care a lot more and root against it more if it was the Padres maybe going to do it, or a division rival maybe going to do it, or something like that. But it's not. So I don't know. There's football going on. I have a lot to pay attention to. I'm kind of out on baseball. I'm on this baseball podcast. I'm not entirely sure why. I don't have a lot to offer. 35 seconds of baseball in the World Series. So it was important 35 seconds, but it's all I got.
Yeah, I mean, you caught the most important thing that's probably going to happen this entire series. The thing that's going to define this series, unless something
and
insane.
Get Freddie Freeman into the Hall of Fame too. But yeah, that's...
I think he was already probably headed there. But this is one of those signature sort of moments. So yeah, this is. The thing was, when I actually started hearing, because they were talking about the fact that obviously this is the 12th time these teams have played, but they haven't played since 1981, and it's actually
40 years. Yeah.
Right. So it's actually been longer since the last time they played each other in the World Series, 1981, than it was going back from 1981 to 1941 when they first played each other. And when I heard that was one of those, it's been longer since Nevermind came out than it has been since, I don't know. It really is one of those moments where you're I feel dead now. I am the oldest person in the world. You see the
further removed from 1985 by Bowling Pursuit being released than that song was to 1985. Yes.
Yes. It's those sorts of things where you're like, oh my God, I'm old. Yeah. So that the fact that this doesn't happen that often, and I was watching the Badger game with my next door neighbor last night, went over after we had concluded the trick-or-treating obligations, and we were sitting and watching it, and I was like, this is only going to be the third time this century that one of these teams won a World Series. The Dodgers did it in 2020 and the Yankees did it in 2009. Other than that, I mean, I guess do we count, is 2000 this century? There's a whole weird thing about that, but like,
Oh God, I don't know
like
semantics of that.
Yeah. So
It
the
doesn't
I
Yankees,
think so.
yeah, the Yankees won in 2000, but basically same point, right? Like those teams that are supposedly the behemoths that are in the playoffs virtually every year, that have been constantly good, haven't actually won that many World Series, which just goes to show like how hard it is to win in baseball, even when you have like the top payroll and when you have everything seemingly sort of lined up for you. It's just really hard to do. So I don't know. I think every once in a while it's good to have one of these and just have it be the thing. And so long as it doesn't keep happening over and over, and it really doesn't. So as long as it doesn't keep happening over and over, then it's mostly fine. I don't get super exercised about it. I'm at this point though really mostly just rooting because I happened to put a few bucks down at Potawatomi when I was there, and so I have the Dodgers, so I will be rooting for the Dodgers to win this World Series. So yeah,
Good start. Yeah, I think I agree that it's kind of fun to see all these names face up against each other in this series, but if we do this 2 more times, I don't know about that. Right now, it's fun because you have the debate on over under like 7 Hall of Famers alone in this series, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Like it is kind of interesting to see that, but at the same time, yeah, I think as Brewers fans, it's hard to get too much behind the two of the 3 biggest payrolls going on. So yeah, we'll see how it turns out. See if the series flips in New York. I just don't know if the Yankees have the pitching to come back from this at this point, and that Dodgers lineup is just dead. So we'll see how long this series goes, or if it's done by the next time we record this next week. All right, Brewers talk. As we mentioned, only real piece of Brewers news that dropped pre-World Series was the dismissal of hitting coach Ozzie Timmons, and in his place, the promotion of AAA hitting coaches Al LaBeouf and Eric Tyson, who will join the holdover hitting coach in Connor Dawson in trying to get the most out of the Brewers hitters. I think we were chatting about this a little bit before we officially started recording here, but kind of surprising given the improvement that the Brewers saw offensively from last year to this year, that maybe they'd make a change. Plus all the talk we've had in the past about how much a hitting coach really matters, right? If it's more organizational philosophy or not. So I guess, Ryan, let's start with you. How surprised were you by the news considering that improvement year over year? And are there good reasons to suspect that this will or won't work?
yeah, I was very taken aback. This was not something I was expecting at all. I wouldn't have thought that there was any reason to make a move like this. This had to be just a disagreement on some basic stuff between, you would sort of assume Murphy, like maybe Murphy and Timmons didn't see eye to eye on some very basic stuff that was going on, or the front office as a whole didn't see eye to eye with him on something, because there's certainly nothing in the performance. They had such a big jump in terms of how well they hit from the year before to this year. I wouldn't have been shocked to see people get fired after last year when they had their worst offensive season in quite a while. I think probably since they were rebuilding in 2015-16. So I wouldn't have been surprised necessarily to see people get fired after that, but to get fired after this isn't how it normally goes. Usually when hitting coaches get fired, they're being scapegoated for the failures of the team to get enough good talented hitters around, and so they say, well, we got to fire the pitching or the hitting coach, and so we're going to do that, and that's going to change our fortunes and whatever. So this doesn't fit that narrative at all. So this must just be there was something about what he was doing they didn't like. It is interesting now. It was one thing when you had 2 hitting coaches. Now you've got 3. So it's going to be, I'd be fascinated to know how they break this down. If they work in different areas, if they sort of focus on different hitters, maybe they have different hitter types that they work with, or if they just sort of let the players gravitate to whoever the players want to gravitate to in terms of getting work and whatever, and how they coordinate so that everybody's sort of, I think you do sometimes run into a potential problem of having too many messages and not having a simple, streamlined enough approach. And maybe the Brewers are beyond that in that they have enough planned out and there's enough coordination and there's enough cooperation going on that isn't a problem, but you do kind of wonder about it, right? That how is all of this going to mesh together? So I don't know if there's good reason to suspect it won't work. I think that in general, the Brewers have done really well hiring coaching staff. Like it's gone really pretty well. And so when you're firing an Ozzie Timmons after a successful season, like that's kind of an indication you're running at kind of a very high level of performance at that point. So I don't know, but I do have some lingering questions about exactly how this is going to work and how everybody's going to get along with each other and how it's going to play out that way.
I don't have anything to add to that because I have no idea. I can speculate about corporate nonsense on this. The only thing I can think of is, I do over the past few seasons, I do think the Brewers have been trying to change their overall hitting coach philosophy, not coach philosophy, generally speaking. And the only thing I'll say is it's not surprising when there is a lot of upheaval in the wake of a big philosophy shift. And they've also had a few, those kind of old now, but they've also had a few involuntary ones as well in the last 4 or 5 years. So I wonder if this is just a matter of them having an eye on certain talent that they perceive may become available at some point and just grabbing what they can that they've had just sort of ranked as fitting their preferred organizational philosophy. But it's a weird move on the heels of what was a quite successful offensive season with some offensive talent that I think is, they frankly played over their heads a bit. So this is the kind of season that usually gets you a bonus, not fired. So I do think it's weird.
Yeah, I was actually looking at something too in the time period because Timmons came on, I believe, after the 2021 season. So this was their third season with Dawson and Timmons at the helm. And a weird thing emerged in this time period where their WRC plus from 2022 to 2024 with the bases empty is 92. Their WRC plus with runners in scoring position over that same time period is 118. Huh. And it's consistent from year to year. It is at least a double digit. It's a double digit difference every single year. 99 to 120, 89 to 111, 89 to 122. The Brewers offense has over the last few years largely been propped up by performing really, really well with runners in scoring position. And so this seems to have been, I don't know, at what point do you think this is a feature and not just like statistical noise? I don't know, but I broke it down and I looked at it and I went, I wonder, there's something going on here where they're doing something and they aren't the only one. There was another team that I saw that also kind of fit this mold. I can't remember who it was now, but I was kind of just eyeballing it, looking at it. And I'm really curious about what is going on with this. And it's also just funny because you always hear people complaining that they suck with runners in scoring position. It's like, well, actually, it's the only thing that's really propped them up and made them, a good team is they've hit so much better with runners in scoring position than they have overall. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch that too. I will be interested to see if that is sticky or not.
We should mention too, according to Adam McKelvey, the way this, I guess, corporate structure, as Paul said, will break down is Al LaBeouf will report directly to Pat Murphy, and then Tyson and Dawson report to LaBeouf. So I guess if you want to say he's the main hitting coach and the other two are just instructors or what have you, you can do that. But kind of interesting to see how that breaks down and like Ryan said, who responds to what there, but definitely kind of following the trend too across the majors of multiple hitting instructors and pitching instructors as well. Staff sizes growing substantially across the league, not just with the Brewers. So we'll see how that works out going forward. I guess the other thing we need to look forward to is like once the World Series is over, right? It's option decision time. So let's go to Patreon, where Luke Roy's Suitcase is asking which options are going to be exercised and who are some non-tender candidates for the Brewers as we head into arbitration as well. So we've got the list here. We'll just go one by one through this and kind of go yay or nay. What do you think will happen? What do you think should happen? So top of the list, Freddie Peralta. So the team holds an $8 million club option on Freddie with a $1.5 million buyout. I feel like this is a quick yeah and move on. Paul, what do you think?
Absolutely. No question. Not even close.
Yeah, no doubt here.
Still benefiting from that extremely team-friendly contract that Freddie signed before he was even really a full member of the rotation. So yeah, that seems obvious. How about Colin Ray, though? So the team holds a $5.5 million club option on Colin Ray for next year. $1 million buyout. He is kind of getting old, but also Paul was kind of their most consistent pitcher start to start this year. What do you think?
I think I do that. I think Colin Ray is limited on the upside, but he is such a good like regular season innings eater that works very well with what will be a good Brewers defensive profile next year as well. And you need a guy like that, and they usually cost about that. So I suspect yes, but I get the opposite as well because they also seem to be able to create Colin Rays fairly regularly. I think they do it though.
Yeah, I think they do too. There's more doubt about this one, but I'd still say it's. I will be surprised if they don't do it, just because 5.5 is not a lot of money, and
yeah,
the inning value there is substantial. So I think they do it, but they are very good at just creating Colin Rays out of nothing. So it wouldn't completely rule out the idea that they would turn it down.
I mean, he's also been kind of one of the more valuable pitchers they've had recently as well. So we'll see. But I was trying to pull up his WAR numbers quick and just see. But obviously, he is well worth the $5.5 million. Moving on, this one is interesting because Rhys Hoskins has an $18 million player option for 2025 with a $4 million buyout if he does not take it. The deal also has an $18 million mutual option for 2026 with a $4 million buyout. We've talked about Rhys quite a lot, Ryan, and there's just no way he turns down $18 million, right? He's not getting that on the free agent market after the year he had. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think so, especially because there's this $4 million buyout for 2026 as well. So this isn't like a $14 million decision. Like he could go back on the market and get that $4 million because of the fact there's also a buyout on 2026. Yeah, I mean, there's just no way that he turns this down. I can't imagine that he would. And so we're going to get a chance to see him now 2 years removed from surgery. And hopefully he benefits the same way that Jesse Winker did from being further removed from having major offseason surgery. And hopefully he has a bounce back. He's not particularly old at this point. I think he's just 31 or 32. He's not particularly old, so he's going to be 32 next year. So hopefully you get that bounce back from him. But yeah, I think this is already a done deal that he's going to be picking this up.
Yeah, I think we need to assume that's the case, right? And I think we've been assuming that for a while, especially as his WAR kind of just tried to get back to zero and didn't quite get there. It's the defense that's really weighing him down, but I don't know if the DH ABs are going to be there next year for him, considering Christian Yelich is going to be coming back off the IL, off back surgery, right? Like we've kind of assumed that Yelich is going to handle most of the DH at bats, and that sticks Hoskins back in the field, which is not exactly where you want him, Paul.
It is unfortunate that Hoskins will probably find his way to the field. As Ryan said, hopefully the bat picks back up, which I do think is a really real possibility. And the other thing to remember with, I feel like it's often portrayed as a negative when you have depth at first base and DH, and it kind of is because it's where you stick people when they can't be on the field. But it's worth noting from a Brewers perspective that while Yelich will probably, if healthy, man that position for the most part, that their people who play those positions do often miss time. And to some extent, this might work itself out in the long run. You know, your hope is Hoskins starts hitting again, that Yelich is healthy enough, but there'll probably be enough at bats to mitigate Hoskins' damage in the field at DH, regardless of anything else. Like projecting Yelich at bats next season is basically impossible at this point. And so, you know, best case scenario, Hoskins' bat is fine, and defense at first base is whatever, and he gets enough DH to mitigate it anyway. And you know, it's too early to like panic or be mad about it. I mean, He might still be bad, entirely possible, but he's probably a good candidate to bounce back. These kinds of scenarios often do bounce back, and it's probably better the Brewers have him than not.
Yeah, and even if he doesn't bounce back, at least the next year is a mutual option, and the Brewers can easily decline that and get rid of him. So
the main issue is just how payroll locked this. It's a big chunk of the payroll, especially with we don't know what the effect of the TV switchover is going to have on what they're doing payroll wise. So this maybe isn't the best year to have a little bit more locked into payroll than they generally have, because they generally don't have a ton locked into payroll. They're able to kind of go year to year on a lot of stuff. And so that might not be ideal, and it might curtail some of the spending they might otherwise do this winter, but we'll just have to see how that plays out.
And it's a good thing that you brought that up, because next on the list is Frankie Montas, who has a $20 million mutual option with a $2 million buyout. I don't know, given the year Frankie had, that he could get $20 million again. So this is more a question of, do the Brewers roll the dice and say, we liked what we saw in the second half and we can work with that? Or, Ryan, is the payroll so locked in that they can't really take that chance? This is an interesting one to me.
So I think the Brewers are going to say no to it, but I was actually talked to by Red Venture a few weeks back on Twitter. Red was talking me into the idea that Frankie actually may be able to get more than this on the open market. Just the market for starters who are kind of in his neighborhood is not as bad as you might think. And so he might actually be able to get, especially like 2 years for more than that guaranteed money.
I guess, yeah, if you want multi-year, right? Like maybe he opts out.
Yeah, like he could get maybe 2 years and 25 or 30 or something like that, especially with the strong finish and the way his stuff ticked up at the end, especially the way his stuff ticked up at the end, I think is going to have people interested. So I think this is one of those cases where both sides might say no. So yeah, I don't see there's any chance he comes back.
I agree that there's no way he comes back. That I am definitely on board with. If he can get anything close to that on the open market, I think you just tip your cap and say farewell. I don't know. They did a good job with Frankie. There are dumb teams for sure out there, but I would be very skeptical of a guy who had struggled for quite a while, since like partway through 2022, that the Brewers fixed, that you're going to keep getting that production out of him. But, root for the player, so hope Frankie gets paid, but not by us.
Yep.
Next up, Wade Miley has a $12 million mutual option with a $1.5 million buyout. I just kind of feel like he's done. We've heard for a couple of years now that he keeps weighing retirement. I don't know, Paul, if he comes back for another $12 million payday or not, but I don't know if the Brewers would take their chances on a 39-year-old Wade Miley.
Yeah,
is that how old he is now?
Yeah, it'll be his age 38 season.
No, he's a good coach. Yeah.
The only argument in favor of Wade Miley is a stupid argument, and I'm only telling it to you in case you hear a talk radio host bring it up, which is that literally since 2016, which involves a trade, so it really since 2018, he has been injured or great every other year. And this is the every other year. He pitched 7 innings. But again, that's stupid, and you shouldn't pay anybody based on that. I love Wade Miley. He's not worth that much money. If you want to bring him back, if he wants to pitch again and you want to give him a very, very low veteran minimum style contract to do it, totally fine with that. But I think Wade should transition into Coach Wade Miley at this point, not pitcher Wade Miley, and move along with his life, because he's old and hurt, and that's not going to work anymore.
Yeah, if he still thinks he has something left and wants to keep going, sure, fine, go ahead. But it's going to be on a much, much smaller contract than that. So this is a no-brainer. You don't pick this up. You take the buyout, and that's that on this one. There's no chance that they pick this up. I mean, frankly, mutual options almost never get picked up by both sides. Like, it's going to be a bad deal for somebody. So chances are they're going to turn it down, whether it's the team or the player. It's rare that it's just, oh yeah, we're both good with this and whatever. We've talked about that for years though. Like these things almost never get mutually picked up. So he's not coming back on this deal. If he comes back, it'll be probably more likely as a coach than anything else. And I would 100% be on board with that. Like Coach Wade Miley, give me that all day long.
Co-bullpen coach with Hendo. Let's do it. One last mutual option here, and it's one I think we all just always assumed would get declined by one or both parties. Gary Sanchez has an $11 million mutual option for next year, $4 million buyout. I don't know. He was okay, but also was hurt for a bunch of the year. He's a catcher in his now early 30s. Paul, we mentioned DH. ABs are going to be hard to come by. He's still awesome against left-handed pitching, but I don't know if you can justify $11 million in a platoon DH.
Yeah, no. Say hello to Eric Haase. Say goodbye to Gary Sanchez. Yeah, that's not going to get picked up.
Yeah, one thing to note here too. First off, I believe part of that Montas deal, part of the deal with the Reds was that they were going to pick up some, if not all, of that $2 million buyout. But it is worth noting here that Gary Sanchez having a $4 million buyout and Wade Miley having a $1.5 million buyout and whatever is left over from Montas and potentially Ray, if they were to turn that down as well, they have a decent amount of money that's tied up in buyouts this year.
Dead money.
There's dead money. Yeah, they have. This is unusual for the Brewers. They don't normally have this level of dead money, and they're gonna this year. So it's worth keeping an eye on.
Add that onto the Ryan Braun July 1st payments as well, and all that stuff. Yes. Yeah. But I mean, honestly, that kind of shows that they were semi going for it this year, I think, in some weird ways. Like if you want to criticize them for not doing much, but they also knew that they were committing $5-6 million in so to speak dead money for next year to try to make a run this year, right? So
I think it's a really, really good point, and it's basically they were putting more money on last year's payroll than showed up in last year's payroll. A lot of that money was deferred to this year, and so they were pushing it down the road a year or two. In some cases here, like with Hoskins, it's a couple years down the road as well. So money is definitely getting pushed forward here. So the fact that their payroll went down as much as it did last year was always a little misleading, just because of how much of that money was actually committed to this year. So we'll see what it means and what it portends for this year, but it's definitely worth keeping an eye on.
One last option we need to talk about, I think, is the most interesting, most contentious, most followable thing this offseason. I think if you're going to follow one thing, this saga might be it. The team holds a $10.5 million club option on Devin Williams with a $250,000 buyout. There was a time when he signed that right before last season, so it was a 2-year deal that he agreed to avoid arbitration, where you're like, yeah, $10.5 million for Devin Williams last season, that seems like reasonable if he's an all-star closer, right? Mm-hmm. Then he went and missed half of last year, so now MLB Trade Rumors has his projection for arbitration, which they would still have him for if they decline this option. His arbitration projection is $7.7 million. So given the conversation we just had about all that money in, declining mutual options with buyouts and stuff, that $3 million does not become insignificant. At the same time, if you deny Devin Williams that $10.5 million and say, screw you, we're offering you $7 in ARB, he is gone, Paul, right? Like that's the last bridge to burn with Devin Williams, and you've burned plenty already.
So the reason I think that there's at least a puncher's chance that happens is because the bridges have really been torched, kerosened, set on fire, salted the earth underneath them to this point already. And so the Brewers, I mean, we know that they are absolute alphas in arbitration. They do not take prisoners. And if they know you're out the door, they might be tempted. That is a dumb move, though, for a lot of reasons, because other players pay attention to such things. Nobody likes to be treated poorly. Agents pay attention to it. And if you give Devin Williams this money, you can still trade him. So you may as well make him at least as happy as he can be and get the value out of him while you have him and then move on from there. But it is an interesting mathematical conundrum that will definitely be brought up by some of the true sharks in the front office 100%.
Yeah, I think there's a very good chance that this does actually happen.
Yeah, it might. Like, it's not. I want to be clear. I think it's like 60-40 they pick it up, but 40 is a big percentage.
Yeah, I think it's more it's more likely they don't pick it up. I think it's more likely
All right.
they go, and I think at that point the trade is absolute. You are trading him. There is no question you are doing that. And so I think at that point it's just that's a fait accompli. And I think that I'm perfectly happy to have him traded anyway. That's what I want, regardless of what they do here. But it is going to matter in terms of if you're going to trade him, having him on a $7.7 million in arbitration or a $10.5 million. That is a difference that is going to change the equation on what you get back in trade. It just will.
I will. My one thing that makes the 60-40. So Ryan is, first of all, Ryan is rational in what he says. I think that they probably will value having Devin Williams not guaranteed out the door as trade value, as a chip. That's why I think it's more likely to happen. Because if it's plausible they can keep him, then they can do a lot more work in leveraging than if it's because every other MLB team is going to be like, oh, that guy's gone. Let's get in on this. Like if they do that. So there's that.
Which makes me wonder if maybe it could happen very quickly. I'm not sure what the soonest you could make a trade is, but like if it's before this decision has to get made and just shoving it onto somebody else, that could be a way to handle it too. But I don't know why another team would want to take that on and be like, okay, fine, we're going to have to be the heavies. We're going to have to be the asshole. Like, I don't think the other side is going to want to do that either. So I think they probably have to bite the bullet on this one. And you're right. That would make it pretty obvious that they needed to trade him. And it might, that could have the counter effect of limiting what you can get in trade for him too. I don't know. It's this is a tricky one. And the takes that are going to come from this, oh my God, just get ready for the Elmo meme with the fire, because the takes are going to be scorching on this one. Basically, no matter what happens, the takes are going to be scorching.
Option decisions are always due, by the way, 5 days after the conclusion of the World Series. So unless the Brewers are already fielding calls, that's going to be a pretty quick turnaround to try to pass that decision off to someone else. I don't know. But
okay,
we'll see what happens. Could be within the next week, and we'll have a Devin Williams trade episode. I don't know. We'll see what happens. So Luke Reyes also asked about ARB decisions. Do you non-tender or tender contracts to a bunch of people? And we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 guys up for ARB, which seems like a large total year to year. Let's start with Aaron Savali, who, like Frankie Montas, was a trade acquisition. He is projected, according to MLB Trade Rumors, for $8 million in his last year of arbitration, unless I'm reading this wrong. So I guess, Paul, Aaron Savali, worth $8 million or no?
I think that's right about correct, which it makes this a tricky call. I suspect no, just because they are good at getting Aaron Savali's and Frankie Montas's. It's something the Brewers just do excel at. And so I don't think they're going to pay anything even close to a premium or, frankly, market value for it. Wouldn't floor me if they did it, but I suspect they do not do it for that reason.
Tell me what the payroll is going to be, and I'll tell you if they pick this up. Basically,
there you go.
Yeah, like if the payroll is going to be in excess,
you got to make your $8 million somewhere for all those, buyouts. So this might be a spot. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if it's going to be over $120 million, I think it's pretty easy to do this. You do it, and you happily do it. If it's going to be closer to where it started last year on paper, anyway, we just did the whole discussion about that. But like, If it's going to be closer to 100, they probably don't. I think they should. I think it's worth it to. It's worth it. He misses bats in a way that not a lot of their guys, like Colin Ray, doesn't miss bats. You know what I mean? Aaron Civale is capable of missing bats, and I know there's home run issues, but I would do it. But this is going to come down to what their payroll looks like.
Also, what do you have in the system? Like Gosser's going to miss most, if not all, of next year, right? Miz may or may not be ready, may or may not be a starter. So you kind of need innings eaters, as we said, too. So that'll be interesting. Next one on the list, William Contreras, $7.6 million projection. That seems like an obvious tender, right, Paul? But maybe do you entertain the idea of a long-term extension to kind of buy out more years, lock those in place?
I think you always try and do that if it's amenable. But long-term extensions are they're almost always team friendly, and so it does kind of depend on just you're going to need a willing participant in this transaction. But I do think you pick that up 100%.
Oh, I mean, obviously you pick it up if you
not
can.
even close.
Yeah. If you can get an extension, he has 3 years of control left. It's going to be harder. Once a guy is into arbitration, you stop getting the big discounts that you could potentially get before that. You start getting closer to real market value. And I don't know. Catchers don't tend to age that well. And that's a thing that they know. So
they don't. And William Contreras has 2 all-star appearances in his 3+ years of team service. So I mean that premium goes up pretty quickly too for a long-term extension.
He should be looking for a lot, and that probably doesn't. The other thing I would want to know is for this one, in terms of the long-term extension thing, how much I would lean on that is what's the status of Jefferson Caro's shoulder? I would very much like to know that.
We have a question about Jefferson Caro coming up, so we can address that shortly. Joel Payamps, relievers in their 4th, 5th, 6th year, once they get into arbitration, basically become more of a non-tender question. But Payamps is only projected for $2.8 million. So, Paul, I know obviously this year was much more of a roller coaster ride with Payamps than last year was. But do you feel like he's still worth it less than $3 million?
Yeah, I do. I still think you do that in a heartbeat. Payamps has good enough stuff, and you shouldn't make any decisions on relievers based on a 1-year sample size, generally speaking. I think his true talent level is very good for, relief pitching. He has good movement. He misses bats. He's not like elite, but he's perfectly serviceable. And he wasn't even that bad this year in the grand scheme of things. He was actually fine. Like he's I think prototypical reliever who walked into some bad BABIP luck and some bad just cluster luck. But he still had his whip was under 1. He's as good as he has been for the last 3 years. You hold on to Payamps for that every day of the week.
Yeah, there was a time in the middle of the season when his stuff seemed to have taken a little bit of a tumble. I think it was the slider particularly wasn't sliding as much as it had been in the past. It wasn't as effective, but he seemed to regain that down the stretch. And 100% echo what Paul said about you don't want to judge these things on 1 year. Again, we're talking about $2.6 million on what might be a tight budget, and their propensity to be able to spin relievers, high leverage relievers out of literally nothing, out of spin straw to gold. Maybe they just say, you know what, we don't need to do this, but I think it's worthwhile and I would do it.
Interesting to me that next on the list, Hobie Milner has a very similar projection, just a little bit less, 2.7 million. So sick of Hobie, Paul. Non-tender, please.
This is more personal than stats based. I do feel like Hobie was more valuable than his common perception is, but I don't actually really like loogies anymore. And nope. he's not even terrible against opposite side pitching. He's just not as good as the rest of the staff is. But there's so many rules that make it hard for that to be effective in this day and age. And I'm sick of watching Hobie pitch. And so I don't know that I would sign a side armor with the 3-batter rule anymore. It just seems to always get them in trouble. So I know his stats are good. I know Hobie can be useful in certain situations. I just don't want to deal with it anymore. I'm done.
Yeah, I basically echo all that. I'm ready to be done with the Hobie Milner experience. Sorry, Laura and everybody else, but yeah, sorry. I do apologize. I know people have a soft spot for Hobie Milner, and I get it. He did some wizardly stuff with the Brewers without having the the stuff to actually make you think he was good. He did things that were really surprising. Especially against right-handed batters, where it was like he was able to get them out at rates that you never would anticipate, given that he's a lefty coming sidearm. But yeah, I'm ready to move on from this, and there's better ways to spend the money. I'm gonna say the same thing to the next guy too.
Yeah.
Funny you should mention that about Hobie, because he was actually better against righties than lefties this year. Small sample size.
All the more reason to get rid of him, honestly.
Yeah. Yes.
Reverse platoon splits. No.
Reverse platoon splits. Yes. Righties had a 280 WOBA against him, 321 for lefties.
That's stupid. Now I want him to go on even more. I can't believe I didn't even bother to look at that. You know why, though? Because you never even think that it was possible that would happen with that delivery. It is asinine.
Yeah, the thing is, there are more righties than lefties out there, so him being better against them is technically better. But
fine, but you know that's not going to stick around,
right?
That's
No, you don't
have him on the roster.
Yeah. No, I know.
Okay, Jake Bauers next, 2.3 million projection for arbitration. I feel like you could get a million Jake Bauers for less than $2 million. Paul, what do you think? I mean, he's fine. He ended up being okay at first base defensively, but that's comparative to Rhys Hoskins. So I don't even know how good he is there.
Jake Bauers had his moment. He's a good defensive first baseman, but he has an 83 OPS plus, and the highest OPS plus he's ever had is 87. And Jake Bauers is just a guy. You can find Jake Bauers anywhere, as James said. So I don't even know if that's expensive in the grand scheme of things. Maybe that's also what Jake Bauers cost these days. And that's the answer if you do actually do this, but I don't think so. I think there's no reason to do this. Like, the Brewers do this experiment every year, and every year their first baseman has an 83 OPS plus, or has a 90 OPS plus, but is the worst defender of all time. Those are your two choices. So no, you don't pick this up. You just go back to the well again, or you spend a lot of money and get a good first baseman, which they won't do because they have no cable money anymore. So yeah, that's that.
This is the one I'm most certain they're not going to pick up.
Yeah, totally.
Up and down here, I'm most certain they will not pick up Jake Bauers here. He does hit the ball hard. There are reasons to think that there was reason to hope that the Brewers could unlock something in him when he came in this year. They didn't. He had his shining moment. Unfortunately, that shining moment was quickly eclipsed by one of the darkest moments in team history. And so. Yep.
Yeah. Oh man.
He
was so close to
is not a song for reasons.
Oh man, his agent was so close to getting that, offered, and now he's in a position of being like $1.5 million. We'll take that. I don't know. If he doesn't settle, he's gone. So yeah. Next one. Kind of seems obvious to me. Trevor McGill is only projected for $2 million, which seems low given how good he was filling in for Devin Williams, Ryan.
And the number of saves, right?
Yes. And arbitration is all about saves. So I offer him that in a heartbeat, right? So I don't know.
Easy pickup.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is correct. Trevor McGill is awesome, and that is underpaying him. So you do that immediately.
Yeah. I don't even know if you entertain multi-year deals with the relievers is always tricky, but if you can think you can get them for like $5 million per for 2 or 3 years, try it. See what happens.
It's just unnecessary because this is only his first year of arbitration. He's got 2 more after this. By that point, you won't want him around anymore. He will have failed enough times at that point that people will be sick of him. So you'll be ready to move on at that point anyway. That's how it works with relievers, right?
Fair. So I wouldn't be mad if they even like settled at like $3 million on this one to avoid a hearing. Like, fine, bring him back. He'll close next year. Eric Haase, next on the list, as we mentioned. If you're not bringing back Gary Sanchez, you kind of need Eric Haase because we don't know what Jefferson Caro's shoulder is going to be like, right? And his projection, Ryan, is 1.8 million. I think given what we saw from him, even if he doesn't hit like that again, he's good enough defensively for less than 2 million, right?
Yeah, with William getting a huge pay increase.
Ooh.
Yeah. They would be committing almost $10 million to the catcher position. So
what did they do this year?
Oh, I suppose
Gary,
with Gary,
you know?
yeah, that's true. That's a good point. So yeah, but I don't know. This one is one of those. I think they probably pick it up and they bring him back, but they also have this habit of like going out and finding literally Eric Haase and turning them, making them better than what they have in the past. So maybe they just lean back on that and say, hey, let's plan on turning another catcher, into something good and useful that we want to keep around. So who knows?
Yeah, I think they do pick it up because you need a catcher, but there are other guys out there. But I mean, it's just Eric Haase, and that's not that much money, and that's kind of what guys cost. So I think they do it.
Also important to remember, as always, arbitration salaries non-guaranteed through a certain point in camp. So if you get to a point in February where you have 3 different catchers, you can always just cut them and not have to be on the hook for that whole total. So there is that. Bryce Wilson is slated for 1.5 million in arbitration, 4 years of service time. I feel like he's almost crowded out of the roster at this point, Paul. What do you think?
I think that's right. And Bryce Wilson has been one of the more smoke and mirrors bullpen guys. He's pitched well and deserves credit for that, but he has frequently outperformed his underlying metrics. And so if there's going to be anybody that gets squeezed off, it's him. I suspect it happens this year.
Yeah, the problem with him is the lack of options. And that's been a problem with him since he came on board, where you can't option him down. You don't have that flexibility. He's roster locked. And so he was immensely important. The Brewers don't survive May and June the way they did without having Bryce Wilson this year. He was critical to allowing them to just sort of survive that time period when all of the pitching was hurt, and they were still looking for the guys who would end up coming in, like Savali and Montas. He was critical to that, but then you saw how he was kind of shunted aside and put on the IL. I don't want to necessarily say it was the
quote unquote.
Yeah, but like he. So I understand they probably have a lot of affection for him in terms of his flexibility and his ability to do all of those things that he did, which has been really, really helpful for these last 2 seasons. More starting this year, more in the bullpen, long relief the year before. But it's tricky from a roster perspective. And again, they're so good at doing this that they can probably find another Bryce Wilson someplace else. But at 1.5 million, it's so little money that I could see it happening. Just because it's so little money, I could see them bringing him back.
Speaking of so little money, I should say, easy for me to say, Nick Mears, first year of arbitration, picked up in a trade from Colorado, 0 minor league options remaining. So let's remember that. Projected for $900,000. The stuff is there, but Paul, he kind of got bit with Matt Bushitis in that everything he gave up was a home run. So I don't know. I feel like it's so little money. Fine. See if you can get him in the program a full winter and go from there. But what do you think?
It's under $1 million, so they'll probably do it. And as previously stated, you can always get rid of guys at some point. But I don't like Nick Mears, and he hasn't been good in the majors at all, ever at this point in time. And the stuff has to work out at some point, whether it's good or not. Brewers are good. I think they pick it up because A, the Brewers like stuff that they can try and fix, and they're good at it. And B, that's nothing. It's just diddly squat in terms of money. It's why you get him in the first place. You get Nick Mears because you think you can fix him. And so I think they will do that, but I don't like him and I wish he was gone. But I think they'll do it.
And there's more reason to think you can fix him because he's coming from the organization that you would have the least faith that they were getting the most out of him possible.
Yeah.
For myriad of reasons.
The Rockies.
They suck. Yeah. So I think they pick him up, and I think you're going to feel better about him next year. I think they're going to turn him around and make him better than he was. So I have positive feelings about this, and I do think they bring him back. But again, that makes it really hard. Him and Wilson seems almost impossible. So that would be a tricky one.
No options between them.
Yeah, no options between them. So you'd have two guys who are kind of on the fringes of your bullpen roster locked. That's not how the Brewers operate. So yeah, that probably can't happen, but we'll see.
All right, let's do some Patreon questions not related to those roster decisions. So first we have Lucas Stoller asking, since the current playoff format seems universally disliked and has produced very few game 3s in the first round, is there any chance MLB scraps it in the near future? What would your realistic, i.e. keeps the owners and TV networks happy, replacement format be? I don't know if there's a good answer for this, Paul. Like, you can't necessarily make that first round best of 5 also. Then you're getting World Series in mid-November. That doesn't seem like a recipe for success either.
I actually disagree with that. And I think that they need to take a broader view of this. I don't know if you guys have noticed this lately, but it's supposed to be 80 degrees on Wednesday this week. And,
it is, yes.
And that is the day before Halloween. And it's been very, very warm out for basically every week except this week since then. Like, you can actually rely on some global warming here, and you can push baseball.
Global warming is going to save the World Series in November.
You can totally go 5 games in the first round and still have the World Series over in a reasonable weather period. That's totally true. Like, first of all, we overrate how cold it gets in November. It is not cold in November in the northern United States, and it never has been. It is occasionally cold. There are freak weather occurrences. There are also hurricanes twice in a week in Florida sometimes. That happens. But if you're from Wisconsin, some of your 80s, 90s, 2000s memories are probably playing outside football with your family on Thanksgiving, and it's probably been fine weather-wise. You've probably worn a T-shirt for it many, many times. So the temperature has gone up. It is not bad to play sports outside as long as it's not raining or snowing. And actually, when it's snowing, it's awesome. Just raining. So they should just make it 5 games and extend the season out. That's totally fine in this day and age. There's no reason not to do it.
So I would go a little bit more creative here, and I understand this is going to happen, though it did get brought up as a possibility, because the biggest problem right now is that people are upset that the best teams are getting basically knocked out real early, real easily. And I think there is a way to make this happen less while also increasing, like, not necessarily the number of games, but what you could theoretically do here, and this is what I would like to see, is what they do in the KBO, which is to have it be a weighted playoff series. So the team that is better has to win 1 game to advance, and the team that is worse in the regular season has to win 2 to advance. And so that sort of thing, if you would port that over to the first round of the current playoffs, you could cut days out of it. And then you could do something in the second round where people really have an issue with this, is those teams that get the bye, though 3 out of 4 did win this year. But in the first couple of years of this, they were not winning. And so there was much hand wringing about it. I think you could do something in that second round that was more like the team that is better has to win, say, 2 to advance, and the team that is worse has to win 3, or something along those lines. And you could keep things relatively the same time period where you're in now, and you wouldn't have to extend later. And you could have a postseason that played out more according to what happened in the regular season. Give real advantages to the teams that were better in the regular season, that earned it. So I would like to see that. I think it's hard to imagine it happening because Americans don't like the weird things
Correct.
like that. But
Yes.
there's precedent for it. It like this works in baseball. They can point to it working in Korea, which I know might as well be the other side of the moon for most American baseball fans. But you could still point to it and go, "This has worked over there," and it actually is quite good. I would like to see a weighted system for those early rounds. I think for the CSs, it's fine. Whatever. You can't get to the point you need to get to where you're actually going to have like a real parity, because that's like a best of 75 series. You're not going to get that. So
Right.
you can, I think best of sevens are fine. These best of fives and best of threes, they need to get more creative with these to give the team that's better a leg up to win them.
All right, Keith Keskinen next this week asking, or saying, starting off, I think we're resigned, Willy playing elsewhere next year, and that's probably best for both parties. I think we agree with that. However, is the following scenario highly improbable, wishful thinking, or a legitimate possibility? The Brewers signed Willy to a deal paying him $160 million over 6 years, but to play third base. That puts him above Matt Chapman's recent deal, and Willy's offensive profile and declining defense could age much better at third base than shortstop. Perhaps I'm optimistic for a fan favorite player, but I think Willy could be a 20-plus home run guy well into his mid-30s. Your best player is making peanuts, and this type of deal would more or less line up Yelich and Willy riding into the sunset together, assuming everything goes perfectly. Thoughts? Paul, would you do that deal? And do you think Willy would sign on to play third base? I think is the big question with that scenario,
I like
right?
the sentiment a lot, but no, I wouldn't, and no, I don't think he would either. And I suspect in the deepest parts of the Brewer front office, where they don't secretly record things to hold over people later and have free discussions, that they are okay and somewhat happy to be moving on from Willy. Because I suspect that every projection that every sophisticated team does on Willy crashes pretty hard in a year or two. And it gives me no pleasure to say this, because I love Willy and he seems like a great guy and a clubhouse leader, and you root for those guys above all else. It's just that there's a lot here that becomes unplayable pretty quickly if it goes away. First and foremost, he's not a good OBP batting average guy. Like, if he loses a little bit of bat speed and that OBP sits around 300, which seems extremely plausible given what you look at on his stat sheet, that becomes a bad offensive player, like really, really fast. And while he has good power for a shortstop, if he loses any power at all, he has terrible power for a third baseman. That is, it's just, if Willy's aging profile, it speaks to me as somebody who's going to be maybe a decent platoon bat who can play some first base and DH, maybe have a cup of coffee at third base, who can't hit same side pitching, although of course he has reverse platoon splits at the moment. Goddamn stupid Brewers. But I wouldn't count on that going forward. And Willy is not an elite athlete to start off here. He has never been particularly fast. He is a good positioning guy at shortstop. He has a good arm. But he's kind of an old player skills shortstop. I just do not see him aging well, and I'm actually okay that they're going to get out from under him this year. I bet by the time he's 32 that he's going to be scrambling to stay with the team.
Yeah, I echo everything Paul said there. This is a non-starter for me, and I think the Brewers are getting out at the right time here, and it sucks, but it's a business. This is a business. It's not, it's a business.
I don't know why I just thought of this, but consider Javi Baez when you look at Willy Adames going forward, because he became a free agent same year after his age 28 season. Javi Baez had a 117 OPS plus in his age 28 season. Willy Adames had a 118 OPS plus this season in his age 28 season. And we all know how that contract has worked out so far for the Detroit Tigers. So I really hope that's not the case. And also, Javi couldn't really play short. He was limited to second base already. So I don't know. I as much as I want to keep Willy around as, clubhouse guy and mentor to the young guys. We have William Contreras for 3 more years for that, I think. I don't know.
Well, and Willie's going to get paid by somebody. That's the other
Yeah,
thing.
Absolutely.
Like
Good
Javi,
for
I think
him.
is a little bit different and worth pointing out so that people who comment on this podcast don't yell at us later. Is Javi was an extremely good athlete, and that's really all he had going for him. And with all the stupid slides and tags and garbage that Cubs fans put memes up about to take us off,
Magic
but
tags,
Javi never saw a ball that he didn't want to swing at. Willie does walk a little bit.
Exactly right.
Brian's giving me
Yes.
thumbs up right now. But Willie walks, and Javi Baez never walked ever. So his whole value is tied up in power and batting average. Willie can get on base at a decent clip. The problem for him is the actual like contact and batting average skills really aren't there for him. It's medium power, and if the bat speed slows down, he's just not going to hit enough to get on base enough. So a little different, but age is not going to treat him well.
No, I should mention Javi Baez also did lead the league in strikeouts in that age 28 season as well. So there you go. Michael Parr next up this week on Patreon asking, will Yoho and Miz break camp with the big club? What would be Miz's role if so? Ryan, you are shaking your head. Why?
Yeah, no, they're not going to be breaking camp with the big league club because they're not going to need to go onto the 40-man roster this winter. So they're not going to need to be, the team isn't going to need to do that. They're going to take looks at other guys. And I suspect, if you want Mizorowski to potentially start, he's a good ways away from doing that. So that if that's a thing you want to see try to happen, and I'm just about ready to say just let him loose in the bullpen and let it fly, but I'm not quite there yet. I'm willing to entertain the idea that give him a start to this year starting and see what you can do with it. See if he can go and make a go of that. But I'm just about there. But he definitely is not ready to be a starter at the big league level and turn over the lineup 2, possibly 3 times. He's not there yet, for sure. Yoho's the one I could see more realistically breaking camp if he was so good and was so overwhelmingly, good in camp that they're just like, we're ready to go here. And if there was a spot for him, if there was a thing opened up, but I suspect what they're going to do is what they do every winter. They're going to collect a bunch of guys that they want to take a look at in camp. And there's going to be some guys who are out of options who they saw enough in camp that they want to take a look at. And so they'll be perfectly happy to send Yoho and Miz down to AAA, let them do their thing there until a need arises, and then make some decisions a little bit later. I think this is how they have run things since Stearns got here, and I see no reason to suspect why it won't be the case this year. So I think we're going to see Yoho and Miz this year almost certainly, but not to open the year almost certainly.
Agreed.
What?
Nothing else to add to that.
I do have one question, Ryan, added on here. So Miz obviously is going to be ranked among the top 100 prospects. Does the draft pick incentive for Rookie of the Year placing factor in at all for you in that decision?
No, I don't think so, because I just don't see him accumulating enough innings or enough saves to win it. So I think no. There are other ways to get compensation. You can potentially finish top 3 in MVP or Cy Young during your pre-ARB years, but that's also not likely to happen. So I don't think he's not the kind of guy that you would make this sort of play for.
Yeah, if a guy's not ready to start, then that's not going to work. You need Paul Skeens to do that work, and any there's random reliever might win a Rookie of the Year once every 10 years or so, but you can't count on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember when
Devin
the last
Williams
time
did in 2020. Devin Williams did in 2020, but that was the shortened year.
Yeah,
that doesn't count.
Yeah, so that's right. Okay.
No.
Yep.
No.
All right.
Yep. So Price Rosen, next question, asking, so Eric Haase, can he be the full-time backup catcher while Caro is getting back into form? One must assume Sanchez isn't going to be back. We kind of covered the latter part of that, Ryan, but Jefferson, Caro, shoulder injuries for catchers. yikes. And I don't know how much I believe in him at catcher going forward. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Carroll, we need to see what it's like and how it's going for him, and we'll get more answers to that in camp next year. In the meantime, Eric Haase is probably the backup catcher last year. We already hit all that. So, like, yeah, he's probably the backup catcher. But then again, never underestimate the Brewers' willingness to just go out and find some rando and turn him into, you know, the second coming of Manny Pena or whatever.
Good pull with Manny Pena.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right. The Michael McNamara, next one. Who's the bulldoggiest pitcher the Brewers have ever had? So this is interesting because I don't know how to necessarily, Ryan, define bulldog of a pitcher. I know it gets thrown around a lot, but has anyone ever defined it? Or is this like one of those baseball unwritten things where you're just like, yeah, that guy's a bulldog? I don't know.
So Oral Hershiser was known as the Bulldog, and that was just because he just like refused to give up runs during that whole 1988 season and whatever. He was out there throwing complete games, not giving up any runs. So like I kind of get that. I was thinking, so from an appearance standpoint, it's Mike Fetters. For those of you who are old enough to remember that.
Hey Ryan, guess who comes up if you Google Brewers Bulldog pitcher?
Oh, it isn't really Mike Fetters.
It is Mike Fetters, number one hit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess bulldogs are typically like short, stocky, strong guys. So
yeah. And like jowly,
yeah.
And he definitely was jowly. Yeah. So
jowly.
And
who's the jowliest Brewer ever? Yeah.
So if you remember back, he also had that thing he did where he would snap his head and like look real menacing.
I love the head snap. Yeah,
the head snap. Yeah, that's iconic, right? Like that's absolutely iconic. So that one definitely popped right to mind. Did you have somebody better, Paul?
I mean, I would just give obvious shout outs to both CC Sabathia for doing that and Brendan Woodruff.
Sure.
I do think Doug Jones is also a candidate to be the bulldoggiest pitcher on any of the 13 teams pitched for. And that's putting a shout out for him.
Yeah, speaking of jowly, yes,
including the Brewers, by the way, whom he pitched for on 2 non-consecutive occasions.
Very non-consecutive, right? He was there in '82, and
extremely non-consecutive occasions.
No, the other guy that I was thinking of too, just for me, never would give in, never would submit. It was Doug Davis, because that man just would not. He didn't care if he walked 4 guys. He just was not going to give you something to hit, and so from that perspective too. But yeah, super good shout on Woodruff, especially because you know where he went to school, right?
Mississippi State, the Bulldogs.
The Bulldogs. Okay. Yeah, so that works. The Brewers have a thing for Mississippi State pitchers. So
yeah, shout outs also to Teddy Higuera for temperament and Chris Bosio for appearance.
Yes.
Brewer Fanatic has an article calling him a bulldog, Chris Bosio. So I feel like that fits. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Ian Pomplin next this week, asking, are any of you memorabilia, merch, bobblehead, baseball card guys? What's your favorite piece you own? Any memorabilia you hate? I remember the disdain for the Paige Sporadic bobble. So other than that, I guess me personally, I actually had a former boss knew I was a huge Brewers fan. So he had a signed Ben Sheets card. I don't know if it was a rookie card. So he had that in his collection. He just gave it to me. So I feel like that's probably the coolest thing I have. I have the CC bobblehead at work. I've got a couple others, but Paul, any collector's items in your collection?
On the football side, I have a Terry Bradshaw rookie card for some reason, and I have
nice.
An official MVP autographed Brett Favre football, which has come down in value a lot over the last couple of years. As for
I hear
Brewers,
he's speaking soon. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. As for Brewer stuff, I do have a decent number of bobbleheads because my parents were season ticket holders for a while, and they chose to get all the bobbleheads given to them, and my brother and I would draft them every year. My favorite is my Lyle Urbe bobblehead commemorating his team record in doubles.
Nice.
I love bobbleheads like that commemorate stupid nonsense. However, my favorite piece of Brewer memorabilia is my Gary Sheffield error rookie card. which is sort of like the One Ring in that I both hate it but will never give it up for any reason. It has his head slightly misaligned higher and a white line that's not supposed to be there on the bottom of the Topps sort of framing box. And I post it on Twitter every once in a while, and people can never tell why it's different than the one that's right next to it, but that is why. So I like that one a lot.
Dang. I think I have like the Ryan Braun. Did they do like a 30-20 or 30-30 season one where like he had a silver slugger too? So he's got the silver bat and then like 30 stolen. I don't know. I've got that too. Ryan, how about you?
My favorite piece of baseball memorabilia until almost exactly a year ago was an autographed Craig Counsell baseball that was given to me by my brother's ex-wife for Christmas one year, because Craig Counsell is actually a distant cousin of him. So both of those relationships ended poorly. Anyways, my favorite thing that I have is, I'm looking at it right now. It's on my wall down here in the basement. And that is a hand-drawn sketch that I got outside the Negro Leagues Museum of rookie Hank Aaron. So it's like in
cool.
pencil.
Nice.
Yep. And bought that outside the museum from one of the street vendors that was outside there and framed it, and absolutely love that. So, yeah.
Nice. Do either of you have the Bill Ripken card?
No, I don't.
I do somewhere have the Bill Ripken card. So
nice. Amazing.
If you don't know what the Bill Ripken card is, don't Google it at work.
It's good advice. It's just generally good advice.
Or do whatever. You're not typing anything in. It's not your fault.
I mean, you could say it too, because we're already well past the point of
not doing that.
Are we? We didn't break the
I did.
E
I
label.
Did
you?
Oh, okay. I did. Yeah.
Did you?
I already did.
don't know. Okay. Well, I also have this weird Bernie Brewer yard gnome that I'm not convinced is not haunted. So I don't know. I just looked down and that guy was there. So that's it.
Is that from the infamous gnome giveaway that caused like a minor riot at the park in Milwaukee?
I don't know.
Here?
I don't know. I'll have to.
I think that one is cone shaped, isn't it?
Yeah. No, this is just like a brick on the bottom. So yeah, I don't think it's like the actual gnome. This is just Bernie Brewer.
Okay. Yeah. For those of you that aren't old enough, you can Google that one. That was
it was a start a riot.
Day.
Yeah,
it did practically start a riot.
Oh my god. I have so many nightmare stories too of like the limited giveaways where like I went to lightweight hoodie day and got like elbowed in the groin area by a grandma trying to get like the last medium or whatever. Yeah, it's bad.
Not to make this podcast like 3 hours long. I also have the euchre alarm clock. So
awesome. Yes, I love that.
That is my other answer.
That's obviously the best thing the Brewers have ever done.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. One last question this week. We have a holdover from Morgoth 10 from last week. So we held this because Morgoth is asking specifically for Paul's opinion. So I know. An impossible task for you all, perhaps, Morgoth, right? But it's never too soon to spin up the marketing/team spirit department for next season and try to come up with a slogan that Paul likes. We need to be undaunted in our pursuit of replacing Undaunted, after all. As marketing team/managerial staff of 3, what are your best 5 pitches for next year's slogan to present for review? I don't know if I have 5 pitches.
5 is asking a lot. Why did you ask
That's
for
a lot.
5? Like
we need choices to go with. I don't know, but anything offhand that's better than an undaunted. Either of you, I don't know.
I got one. 2 shining moments.
2 shining moments.
2 shining moments.
That's a callback. That's what they call that, kids.
That is a callback.
Oh, another bite of the apple.
I've always liked blood, sweat, and hops. That's what I would go for.
Ooh, nice. That's gritty. That's the spirit of this team. You know, blood, sweat, and hops. So yeah, I dig that. I don't know.
5,
Ryan,
I tried to come up with 5, and they're all bad. And like,
no,
yeah.
Well, that's the thing is like when you come up with 5 pitches, at least 2 or 3 are going to be total ass. So
That's correct.
You know, yeah, I don't know. That's why I don't like placing limits on these things. Blood, sweat, and hops. I like that. So let's just roll with that for now until we think of something better. We got some time before opening day. All right. That'll do it for questions this week. Thanks, everybody. Reminder, patreon.com/MKE tailgate. $2 a month gets you that question priority. And we really need those questions to kind of fuel the conversation through the off season as we wait for the Brewers to do something in February. Also, when you sign up, you do get a shout out on this program. So, Ryan, it looks like we have a couple of folks who have signed on since the last week. Who do we have?
Yeah, welcome to Adam Poole and John Honor. I believe I got those right, for joining up here and helping us out. You guys get the both extra podcasts at this point. So
Nice.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you both for that. And even if you're not a patron, reminder, support us another way. If you can, go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're hearing this right now. If you haven't already, and give us a 5-star review, that'll help us, get more followers and get more attention through the off season as well, and kind of grow that audience. So we greatly appreciate that. And while you're there, be sure to hit the subscribe or follow button. Make sure you never miss an episode. So that'll do it for this week. I guess we'll see how the World Series shakes out. And then, as I mentioned, 5 days after the World Series, the Brewers have a bunch of option decisions to make. So we'll see if we have any of that to talk about, any other news. If the Cubs poach Walker McKinnon, we'll see if that happens too.
Don't even put that
I know
into
it's
the
Ryan's
universe.
worst nightmare. Yeah. I got to put that out there in the universe just so we know it's out there. We'll see what happens over the next week. Thanks everybody for joining us. Have a good week, and we'll see you next time here on Milwaukee's.
Fair weather fan, it's not what I am, even though the simple code has changed. I might smile and joy where I'm currently employed. Your soul can't be rearranged. It's hard to understand. So hard to understand. Fair weather, fair weather, fair weather fan.
As far as IPAs, I only like hazies these days.
Yeah.
That's a good tongue
All right.
twister. That's a good way to teach fiction. Besides IPAs, I only like hazies these days. It's good.